When I decided to become vegan for ethical reasons, quitting cheese was certainly my biggest concern. How can one live without cheese? It turns out cheese is not only a delicious ancient food appreciated by humans for more than 10,000 years, but it contains concentrated amounts of a component called casein that can turn into opioid substance in the body called casomorphins. That means most of us not only love cheese, but are actually addicted to cheese. That explains my personal difficulty of going cheese-free. It took me about a month without dairy to stop craving cheese whenever I looked at it. When I first discovered that we could make Camembert-like cheese with cashews, I had to try it. I was especially happy to use cashews in the place of milk, since they originally come from my home country, Brazil. I named my cheese Cajubert. Caju is the name of cashew fruit in Portuguese. I'm not sure the French would approve of this appropriation, but I guess it is my way of keeping the traditional knowledge alive while adapting to my current ethical values. The process of fermenting Camembert is really simple, one of the biggest difficulties being to actually get the microbial cultures responsible for the white rind, which I got online. After you have the culture and inoculate cashew cream with it, then the microbial cultures do most of the job for us. We only need a day for the first bacterial fermentation to happen, and then a few weeks for the yeast to grow around the cheese. Original Camembert used to be made with wild yeast cultures, present in the air and raw milk itself, but now it's mostly made, even by artisanal producers, with commercial Penicillium Camembeti. To mold the cheese, I transferred the fermented cashew cream to a plastic-lined ramekin and left it in the fridge for a couple of days to firm. The cheese still came out too soft, so I used my hands to adjust its form. I decided to place the already firmer cheese in a cool box at room temperature, since I couldn't find a cool enough spot in my house. I used a Japanese mat to keep some space between the cheese and the box, so that the rind could develop under it. Starting to see the cheese come to form made me think of the first French artisans that developed this technique. The French adore cheese so much that the creator of Camembert actually has a statue for her in the city that represents the cheese. Taking care of yeast and bacteria during fermentation is not a streamlined process. Although I read heaps of instructions online, I still had to trust my senses, smelling and observing, to check how the curing was developing. Making Camembert cheese at home takes about 3 weeks before you can taste the final cheese. That is if you get everything right on the first time, which wasn't my case. My first trial at making my Cajubert at home ended up smelling pretty bad. Was that the smell of good or bad mold? I only had my instincts to guide me on that one. After doing some research online, I realized that the reason my cheese grew bad mold was probably because of the higher temperatures we had a few days in Melbourne, when the cheese was curing. Camembert mold likes to grow between 8 to 14 degrees Celsius. Because I didn't have any special cheese cave to monitor the temperature, the safest option for my second trial was doing curing in my fridge, at the highest temperature setting. The second time, I also had a lot going through my mind. I only had a month before the presentation of this film, so I couldn't risk having to throw another cheese out. Should I be using gloves every time I handle the cheese? Did the cheese need more air circulation or humidity? Would the lower temperature of the fridge be too cold for the yeast? There wasn't much I could do besides being completely present in the process and waiting for time and the microbes to do their job. Waiting for 3 weeks and turning my cheese every day to allow the mold to grow evenly made me very anxious for the final tasting. On some days, I had to stop my impulse of cutting the cheese too early to check out if everything was alright. It's amazing how even though we can't see by naked eye, there is a whole ecosystem of microbes living in the rind of this cheese. And this ecosystem is so unique that it will be impossible to reproduce it exactly the same again. After 3 weeks of waiting for the beautiful white rind to grow, I couldn't resist calling my family in for a trial. Visually, it was quite impressive. The taste? Well, it was okay for my first try. Even though all I was making was cheese, I felt like I was learning more about time than anything else. Making cheese is a symbiotic relationship between us humans, bacteria, and yeast, and there is a limit to how much you can speed things up if you want to make it right. If making one cheese takes at least 3 weeks, imagine how long it would take to actually master it. No wonder Katz, the fermentation activist, talks so much about the revolutionary forces of fermenting at home. Yes, it can be an act of resistance against the homogenization of taste by the food industry, but it's also a movement of resistance against the commodification of our own time. Mastering cheese is the result of continuously investing in the process. No matter how much we like to control everything, life is more about learning how to deal with changing circumstances as they come along. And it's probably more fun and exciting this way.